There is a quiet tragedy happening in millions of lives right now. It does not make headlines. It does not shake the earth. No one gathers to mourn it. And yet, it is one of the deepest losses a human being can ever experience. It is the slow, invisible disappearance of a person from their own life. Not because they died, but because they never chose themselves. And if you listen very closely, you might hear something unsettling tonight, a soft echo within your own heart, asking a question you have been avoiding for years. Where did I go? There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the silence becomes louder than the noise of the world. A moment when the endless doing, pleasing, sacrificing, and surviving suddenly pauses. And in that stillness, you feel an ache you cannot quite explain. It is not physical pain. It is not even sadness in the ordinary sense. It is something deeper, something ancient, the pain of abandonment. But not the kind inflicted by others. No, this is the quiet sorrow of having abandoned yourself. Many people live entire lifetimes without realizing this has happened. They wake up each morning, follow the same patterns, fulfill the same expectations, and carry the same burdens, believing this is simply what life is supposed to be. They call it responsibility. They call it loyalty. They call it loyalty. They call it love. But deep inside, something feels misaligned, like a song playing slightly off key. And that misalignment grows slowly over time. You see, from the moment we are born, we are taught, often with good intentions, that our worth comes from how well we meet the needs of others. We are praised when we are praised, when we obey, when we adapt, when we fit neatly into the shapes the world has prepared for us. We are rewarded for being agreeable, dependable, and selfless. But somewhere along the way, a subtle misunderstanding begins to form. We start to believe that choosing ourselves is selfish, that listening to our inner voice is dangerous, that honoring our true desires is irresponsible. And so, we learn to silence the quiet whispers of our own soul. At first, it feels harmless. You ignore a dream because it seems impractical. You say yes when you want to say no. You stay in situations that drain your spirit because you fear disappointing others. You convince yourself that this is maturity, that this is sacrifice, that this is what good people do. But what you may not realize is that every time you ignore your truth, something inside you retreats just a little further into the shadows. Imagine a child standing at a window, waiting for someone to come home. The hours pass, the sky darkens, the house grows quiet. And still, no one arrives. That child eventually stops waiting. That is what happens inside you when you repeatedly refuse to choose yourself. The part of you that longs to be seen, heard, and honored slowly stops knocking. This is the price. Not dramatic collapse. Not sudden destruction, but a gradual fading, a dimming of your inner light. You may still function perfectly in the world. You may still achieve success, maintain relationships, and fulfill responsibilities. To others, you may even appear strong, stable, and admirable. Yet in the quiet moments, late at night, in the spaces between conversations, in the silence after a long day, you may feel an emptiness that no achievement can fill, because the deepest human need is not merely to survive or to be accepted. It is to feel fully alive, And aliveness comes only when you are in harmony with your true self. There is a story often whispered in spiritual traditions about a traveler who carried a lantern through a vast desert. The lantern represented his inner truth, his purpose, his authenticity, his connection to the divine. But as he journeyed, he encountered many voices telling him to dim the light so he would not attract attention, so he would not stand out, so he would not disturb others. And so, little by little, he lowered the flame. Years later, he reached the end of the desert, only to realize he had forgotten what the light looked like at full brightness. This is what happens when we do not choose ourselves. We do not lose our worth, because that is given by God and cannot be taken away. But we lose our awareness of it. And without that awareness, we begin to live as if we are smaller than we truly are. Faith teaches something very profound about this. It reminds us that we were not created by accident. Every soul carries a unique spark, a divine imprint that reflects the infinite creativity of the Creator. When you ignore that uniqueness, when you suppress the calling placed within you, you are not simply neglecting yourself. You are turning away from a sacred trust. There is a verse that echoes across many spiritual traditions in different forms, a message that says, "You were created with intention, and you are meant to walk the path prepared for you." To deny that path is not humility, it is forgetfulness. And yet, many people fear choosing themselves because they believe it will lead to isolation or rejection. They worry that if they honor their truth, they will lose love, stability, or approval. This fear is powerful because humans are wired to belong. But here is a paradox that few realize until much later in life. The more you abandon yourself to keep others, the more disconnected you eventually feel from them. Because true connection can only exist when you are present as your authentic self. Otherwise, relationships become performances, and performances are exhausting. You find yourself constantly managing expectations, adjusting your behavior, and suppressing your feelings. Over time, this creates an invisible distance between you and the people around you, even those you love deeply. It is like speaking through a wall. Your voice reaches them, but your true essence does not. And this is why so many people feel lonely, even when they are surrounded by others. The loneliness is not caused by lack of company. It is caused by lack of self-presence. When you do not choose yourself, you are not fully there. And if you are not fully there, how can anyone truly meet you? There is another hidden cost as well, one that touches the spiritual dimension of life. When you consistently ignore your inner guidance, your intuition begins to quiet down. That inner compass, which is often described as the whisper of the divine within you, becomes harder to hear, not because it stops speaking, but because you have stopped listening. And without that guidance, life can start to feel directionless, even when everything appears outwardly stable. You may find yourself asking questions like, why do I feel restless even when things are fine? Or why does success feel empty? Or why do I feel like I am missing something I cannot name? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are signals. They are gentle invitations from your soul, reminding you that you were not meant to merely exist, You are meant to awaken, and awakening often begins with a simple, courageous realization that choosing yourself is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of alignment. It means recognizing that your well-being matters, your voice matters, your dreams matter, because they are part of the divine design placed within you. To choose yourself is to say, I trust that God did not create me without purpose. It is to honor the life that was breathed into you. It is to step into the fullness of who you were meant to be. But this journey does not happen overnight. It requires patience, gentleness, and faith. A fact that even if you have spent years ignoring your truth, it has not disappeared. It is still there, waiting quietly, like a lamp that has never gone out, only been covered. And when you begin to remove those coverings, even slowly, you may notice something remarkable. A sense of peace begins to return. Not the fragile peace that depends on external circumstances, but a deep, steady calm that comes from knowing you are finally walking in harmony with your own soul. So if you feel tonight that something inside you has been neglected, if you sense that you have been living for everyone except yourself, do not let that realization fill you with regret. Let it fill you with hope, because the truth is, no matter how long you have wandered away from yourself, the path back is always open. And every step you take toward honoring your truth is also a step toward the divine plan that was written for you long before you took your first breath. So, be patient with your journey, trust the timing of your awakening, and remember that choosing yourself is not about turning all I from others. It is about finally turning toward the life God intended for you all along. And when you walk that path with faith, something beautiful begins to unfold. You do not just find yourself, you find peace. And when that first quiet spark of peace begins to return, it can feel almost unfamiliar, like stepping into sunlight after living too long in a dimly lit room. There is warmth, yes, but there is also a strange discomfort, because when you start to awaken to yourself, you also begin to see clearly the places where you once abandoned your own heart. This is often the most tender and unsettling part of the journey. You begin to notice the years spent saying yes when your soul whispered no. You remember the dreams you quietly folded away to fit into someone else's expectations. You see the moments when you shrank yourself to avoid conflict, rejection, or judgment. And for a while, this awareness can bring a wave of sorrow that feels heavy and overwhelming. But this sorrow is not punishment. It is healing. It is the heart's way of releasing what it has carried silently for far too long. Imagine someone who has been holding a heavy stone for years. At first, they barely notice the weight because they have grown used to it. At the moment they decide to set it down, their arms tremble, their muscles ache, and they suddenly realize how exhausted they truly are. Choosing yourself is like putting that stone down, and in that moment, you may feel both relief and grief. Relief because you are finally free from the burden of constant self-denial. Grief because you begin to see how long you lived without that freedom, Many people, when they reach this stage, are tempted to turn back. The discomfort of facing their truth feels too intense. They think, maybe it was easier before, when I wasn't asking these questions, when I was just going along with everything. But here is the deeper wisdom. The discomfort you feel when you start choosing yourself is not a sign you are doing something wrong. It is a sign you are waking up. For awakening is rarely comfortable. It shakes the illusions you once relied on. It challenges the roles you have played for years. It invites you to step into a version of yourself that feels both deeply familiar and strangely new. And one of the greatest fears that arises at this stage is the fear of disappointing others. Because when you begin to honor your truth, you may need to set boundaries where none existed before. You may need to speak honestly in situations where you once stayed silent. You may need to walk away from patterns that once defined your identity. This can feel terrifying, not because you want to hurt anyone, but because you care deeply about being loved and accepted. Yet there is something important to understand here. Love that requires you to abandon yourself is not love that nurtures your soul. It is a form of attachment rooted in fear. True love, whether from people or from the divine, does not ask you to shrink. It does not demand that you silence your truth. It does not punish you for honoring your own well-being. True love creates space for you to be fully alive. And when you begin to choose yourself, you are not rejecting others. You are simply refusing to reject yourself any longer. There is a powerful reflection, often shared in spiritual teachings, that each person is entrusted with a unique life. And one day they will be asked how they cared for that trust. Not how perfectly they pleased others, not how much they sacrificed their identity, but how faithfully they lived the life placed within them. This perspective changes everything, because it reminds you that your life is not merely a collection of obligations. It is a sacred gift. And if I are meant to be honored, not neglected. There was once a woman who spent most of her life caring for everyone around her. She was known as dependable, kind, and endlessly giving. Whenever someone needed help, she was there without hesitation. She rarely rested, rarely asked for anything in return, and rarely spoke about her own needs. To the world, she appeared admirable. But inside, she carried a quiet emptiness she could not explain. One day, after years of living this way, she found herself sitting alone in the early hours of the morning. The house was silent. The responsibilities that once filled every moment of her life had temporarily paused. And in that stillness, she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in decades. She felt invisible, not to others, but to herself. It was as though she had spent so much time looking outward that she had forgotten to look inward. And in that moment, she whispered a simple prayer, "God, I don't even know who I am anymore." What followed was not a sudden miracle or dramatic transformation. Instead, it was a gentle unfolding. She began with small steps. She allowed herself moments of rest without guilt. She started listening to her own thoughts without immediately dismissing them. She learned to say, "Not right now," instead of always saying yes. Slowly, something remarkable happened. She did not become less loving. She became more present. She did not lose relationships. She deepened the ones that were truly meaningful. And most importantly, she rediscovered herself. This is what happens when you begin choosing yourself from a place of faith rather than fear. You start to realize that honoring your soul does not take anything away from others. Instead, it allows you to show up in the world with more clarity, more authenticity, and more genuine compassion. Because when you are connected to your own heart, your kindness is no longer driven by obligation. It flows naturally from a place of wholeness. Faith plays a powerful role in this transformation. It reminds you that you are not alone in this journey, that the same divine presence that placed dreams and longings within you is also guiding you toward them. There is a quiet assurance in trusting that when you choose yourself in alignment with truth and goodness, you are not stepping away from God's path. You are stepping onto it. This trust allows you to release the constant fear of making the wrong decision. It helps you understand that life is not a fragile puzzle where one mistake ruins everything. Instead, it is a living, unfolding story where every sincere step toward authenticity draws you closer to your purpose. And with time, you begin to notice something deeply comforting. The more you choose yourself, the less you need external validation, because your sense of worth no longer depends on approval. It rests in something far deeper, the quiet knowing that you are living honestly, faithfully, and in harmony with your soul. This knowing brings a kind of peace that cannot be shaken by criticism or uncertainty. It is the peace that comes from alignment, the peace of walking your own path with trust in the divine wisdom guiding you. So if you find yourself in the midst of this awakening, feeling both hope and discomfort, remember that this is not a sign of losing your way. It is a sign of finding it. Every moment you choose to listen to your inner voice, every time you honor your needs without guilt, every step you take toward authenticity, you are reclaiming a part of yourself that was never truly lost. And in that reclamation, something sacred happens. You begin to feel whole again. So be gentle with yourself. As you continue this journey, trust that even the uncomfortable moments are part of your healing, and hold on to the quiet faith that choosing yourself is not a departure from love. It is a return to it. And as this return to yourself deepens, you begin to notice something that once felt impossible. The noise of the world starts to lose its grip on your heart. The opinions that once controlled your decisions begin to sound distant, like echoes fading across a vast valley. The fears that once kept you trapped in patterns of self-denial slowly loosen their hold. But this stage of the journey carries its own quiet challenge, because when you finally stop abandoning yourself, you must face the life you have built while doing so. And this can be both liberating and painful. You may realize that certain environments drain your spirit, that some relationships exist only because you are constantly sacrificing your truth to maintain them, that many habits were never truly yours. They were simply ways to cope with the emptiness you felt when you ignored your own needs. This realization can feel like standing in a room where the lights have just been turned on after years of darkness. Suddenly, you see everything clearly: the beauty, the clutter, the things that belong, and the things that no longer do. And for a moment, you might feel overwhelmed. You may wonder, what do I do now? How do I begin to rebuild my life in a way that truly reflects who I am? This is where patience becomes essential, because choosing yourself is not a single decision. It is a continuous practice. It happens in small, quiet moments, not just in dramatic changes. It is the moment you allow yourself to rest without guilt after a long day. It is the moment you speak honestly, even when your voice trembles. It is the moment you listen to your inner guidance instead of automatically seeking approval. Those small choices may seem insignificant at first, but over our time, they reshape the entire direction of your life. There is a beautiful analogy often used in spiritual reflection. It speaks of a garden entrusted to a caretaker. If the caretaker neglects the garden for years, focusing only on tending to others' fields, the garden becomes overgrown, tangled, and wild. At first glance, it may look beyond repair, but the moment the caretaker returns and begins gently clearing the weeds, watering the soil, and allowing sunlight to reach the ground again, life begins to stir beneath the surface. Seeds that were buried long ago start to awaken. This is what happens within you. When you begin choosing yourself, you are not creating something entirely new. You are uncovering what was always there. Your joy, your creativity, your sense of purpose, your capacity for deep peace, all of it has been waiting quietly beneath the layers of neglect. And as these parts of you begin to re-emerge, you may feel something you have not experienced in a very long time. You may feel alive, not in the loud, restless way the world often defines excitement, but in a steady, grounded way, like a calm river flowing with quiet strength, like a deep breath after years of holding it in. This aliveness brings clarity. You begin to understand that your life was never meant to be an endless cycle of proving your worth. It was never meant to be a constant struggle to meet expectations that ignore your true nature. Your life was meant to be an expression of the unique soul you were created to be. Faith reminds us that every person carries a divine signature, a combination of gifts, experiences, and perspectives that no one else can replicate. When you choose yourself, you are not just honoring your own needs. You are honoring that sacred uniqueness. You are honoring that sacred uniqueness. And this understanding dissolves one of the greatest fears people carry. The fear that choosing themselves will lead to isolation. Because in truth, the opposite happens. When you begin to live authentically, you attract connections that resonate with your true self. You no longer need to maintain relationships through constant self-sacrifice. Instead, you experience the quiet joy of being seen and accepted for who you truly are. These connections feel different. They feel lighter, more genuine, more nourishing, because they are built on truth rather than performance. There is also a profound spiritual shift that occurs during this stage. As you align more closely with your inner truth, you become more sensitive to the subtle guidance that flows through life. You begin to notice synchronicities, unexpected opportunities, and moments of deep clarity that seem to appear at exactly the right time. This is not coincidence, it is alignment. It is what happens when your actions begin to move in harmony with the path intended for you. There is a quiet verse often shared in faith traditions that carries a comforting message that when a person takes even a small step toward what is right for their soul, divine support meets them with greater steps. This does not mean life suddenly becomes free of challenges. It means that even in difficulty, you feel guided, you feel supported. You feel that your life is no longer a random struggle, but part of a meaningful journey. And this realization brings a deep sense of trust. Trust that you are not alone. Trust that choosing yourself does not mean walking away from God's plan. It means walking into it more fully. There is a story about a man who spent years trying to please everyone around him. He shaped his career based on others' expectations, suppressed his passions, and constantly ignored his own needs. From the outside, his life looked successful, but inside, he felt disconnected and exhausted. One evening, after a particularly overwhelming day, he found himself sitting in silence, feeling a heaviness he could no longer ignore. In that moment, he asked himself a question he had avoided for decades. If I continue living like this, will I ever truly feel at peace? The answer that rose within him was quiet but undeniable. No. That single realization became the turning point of his life. He did not make drastic changes overnight. Instead, he began with small acts of honesty. He allowed himself to acknowledge what truly mattered to him. He gradually adjusted his choices to reflect his inner truth. Over time, something remarkable happened. The exhaustion that once weighed him down began to lift. The emptiness that once haunted him started to fade. And in its place, he felt a steady sense of purpose and calm. This transformation did not come from abandoning others. It came from finally refusing to abandon himself. This is the essence of choosing yourself. It is not an act of rebellion against the world. It is an act of rebellion against the world. It is an act of reconciliation with your own soul. And when you live from that place of reconciliation, something beautiful unfolds. You become more compassionate, not less, more patient, not less, more capable of giving, not less, because your giving now flows from fullness rather than depletion. So if you are standing at this point in your journey, feeling the tension between the life you have known and the life your heart is calling you toward, remember this: you do not need to have everything figured out. You only need the courage to take the next honest step. Trust that each small act of self-honoring is guiding you closer to the peace you seek. Trust that the divine presence within you is gently leading you forward, even when the path feels uncertain. And trust that choosing yourself is not a loss. It is a homecoming. So move forward with patience. Walk with faith. And remember that every step you take toward your truth is also a step toward the life that was always meant for you. And as you continue walking this path, of returning to yourself, something subtle yet profound begins to happen within you. The restless urgency that once filled your days starts to soften. The constant need to prove your worth slowly dissolves. You no longer feel as though you are running against time, chasing approval, or trying to earn the right to exist. Instead, you begin to experience a quiet stillness. It is the stillness of finally coming home after wandering for a very long time. You see, the deepest price of not choosing yourself was never just exhaustion or unhappiness. It was the gradual loss of your inner peace. It was the silent distance that formed between you and your own soul. It was the way life began to feel heavy, even when everything looked fine on the surface. But when you start choosing yourself, gently, patiently, faithfully, that lost peace begins to return like the morning light after a long night. And with it comes a new understanding. You begin to see that life was never meant to be a constant struggle of self-denial. It was never meant to be an endless performance to secure love or acceptance. It was meant to be a journey of awakening, a journey of discovering who you truly are beneath all the expectations and fears. This realization changes the way you see everything. You start to understand that your worth was never something you needed to earn. It was something you were born with basic, given freely by the one who created you. There is a quiet truth echoed across many faith traditions, a reminder that you were known before you were even formed, that your existence carries meaning beyond what the world can measure. When you truly absorb this truth, something shifts deep within your heart. You stop chasing validation because you realize you were already chosen. This is the moment when the fear of choosing yourself begins to lose its power, because you no longer see it as an act of defiance. You see it as an act of trust. You see it as an act of trust. Trust that the voice within you is not random noise, but a reflection of the divine guidance placed in your soul. Trust that the dreams you carry are not selfish desires, but seeds planted with purpose. Trust that honoring your truth is not a betrayal of others, but a way of living the life you are entrusted with. And as this trust grows, you begin to move through the world differently. You no longer feel the need to shrink yourself to fit into places that cannot hold your authenticity. You no longer feel compelled to say yes when your spirit quietly says no. You no longer carry the constant weight of trying to be everything for everyone. Instead, you begin to live with a calm, grounded confidence, not loud or arrogant, but steady, peaceful, because it is rooted in alignment. Alignment between your actions, your soul, and your faith. There is something deeply beautiful that happens when a person reaches this stage of their journey. They become a source of quiet light for others, not because they try to fix or control anyone, but because their presence carries a sense of peace that others can feel. When you are connected to yourself, you no longer radiate desperation or tension. You radiate calm. You radiate authenticity. You radiate the silent assurance that it is possible to live without abandoning your soul. And this becomes an unspoken invitation to those around you. An invitation that says, You don't have to lose yourself to belong. You don't have to silence your truth to be loved. You don't have to carry the world at the cost of your own heart. Your life itself becomes the message. Not through words, but through the way you live, through the way you set boundaries with kindness, through the way you honor your needs without guilt, through the way you trust the unfolding of your path, and perhaps most importantly, through the peace that shines quietly in your eyes. Because peace is the ultimate sign that you have stopped abandoning yourself. It is the evidence that your soul and your life are finally moving in the same direction. There is a powerful reflection often shared in spiritual wisdom, that at the end of life, people rarely regret the risks they took to honor their truth. What they regret most are the moments when they silenced their own hearts out of fear, the dreams they buried, the life they postponed, while waiting for permission that never came. This reflection is not meant to create anxiety. It is meant to awaken awareness, because you are here now, breathing, still capable of choosing differently, still capable of returning to yourself. And this means something very important. It means it is never too late, no matter how many years you spent ignoring your truth, no matter how deeply you buried your dreams, no matter how far you feel from the person you once hoped to become. The path back to yourself is always open, because your true self never left. It only waited patiently, quietly, faithfully, for you to turn toward it again. And now, as you stand here in this moment, perhaps listening with a heart that feels both tender and hopeful, you are already taking that turn. You are already reclaiming something sacred. You are already moving toward the life that was always meant for you. So continue walking gently. Continue listening inwardly. Continue trusting that each small act of self-honoring is guided by something greater than fear. And remember this truth. Above all else, choosing yourself is not about becoming someone new. It is about finally allowing yourself to be who you were created to be. It is about stepping out of survival and into alignment, out of fear and into trust, out of emptiness and into peace. And as you continue this journey with patience and faith, you will discover something quietly miraculous. The more you choose yourself in alignment with truth and goodness, the closer you feel to God, the closer you feel to peace, the closer you feel to home. And now, after walking through these reflections together, after uncovering the quiet cost of self-abandonment, the painful awakening, the slow return, and the gentle rediscovery of your soul, we arrive at a sacred realization. The greatest tragedy was never that life was hard. It was that, for so long, you believed you had to disappear in order to survive it. You believed that love required you to shrink, that acceptance required you to silence your truth, that being good meant being everything for everyone except yourself. But your soul never agreed with that story. It waited patiently, faithfully, like a light burning in a distant window, waiting for you to find your way back home. And now, perhaps for the first time in a very long time, you can see that light clearly. You can feel it. It is the quiet warmth in your chest when you finally tell yourself the truth. It is the calm that arrives when you stop fighting who you are. It is the deep breath you take when you realize you no longer have to carry the unbearable weight of pretending. This is what it feels like to return to yourself. Not loud, not dramatic, but deeply peaceful. Like a storm slowly settling into still water. And as this peace settles within you, a beautiful understanding begins to unfold. You were never meant to lose yourself to fulfill your purpose. You were meant to discover yourself through it. Through it. Every longing you carry, every dream that quietly refuses to fade, every inner whisper that calls you toward a life of truth and alignment is not random. It is sacred guidance. It is the voice of the life that was placed within you by divine intention. And when you choose yourself, not from ego, but from faith, you are not walking away from God's plan. You are stepping into it. You are honoring the breath that was given to you. You are protecting the soul that was entrusted to you. You are finally saying, I accept the life I was created to live. There is something profoundly healing in this acceptance, because it dissolves regret. It softens shame. It replaces the painful question, why did I abandon myself for so long, with a gentler truth. I have found my way back, and that is what matters most. Not how long you wandered, not how far you drifted, but that you turned around, that you listened, that you chose to come home to your own heart. Faith reminds us that the divine is never distant from those who return to truth, that even when we lose our way, we are never truly lost, that every sincere step toward alignment is met with mercy, guidance, and quiet support. So tonight, if your heart feels tender, if tears rest quietly behind your eyes, if you sense both relief and vulnerability at the same time, let that be a sign of healing. Let it be a sign that the walls around your soul are gently falling away. And in this moment, allow yourself to receive something you may not have given yourself in years: gentleness, forgiveness, love. You do not need to punish yourself for the times you forgot who you were. You only need to honor who you are now. So close your eyes for a moment, breathe slowly, and imagine placing your hand over your heart. Feel its steady rhythm. That rhythm has never stowed. Pep for you. Not when you doubted yourself, not when you silenced your truth, not when you felt lost. It has always been there, quietly reminding you that life still flows within you. And so now, let us end with a simple, heartfelt prayer. May you have the courage to choose yourself without guilt. May you have the wisdom to recognize the voice of truth within you. May you have the faith to trust that honoring your soul is part of honoring the one who created it. May the burdens of self-abandonment fall gently from your shoulders, May peace replace the emptiness you once carried. And may you walk forward from this moment with a quiet, steady knowing that you are allowed to exist fully. You are allowed to live honestly. You are allowed to be whole. And you are deeply, unconditionally loved exactly as you are. Rest in that truth. Walk in that peace. And never forget, choosing yourself is not the end of love. It is the beginning of it.
It is a curious thing how certain words, certain ideas, certain encounters arrive in our lives at precisely the moment they are most needed. You may wander for years without noticing them, pass them by in books, or hear them spoken in conversations without giving them a second thought. And then, suddenly, one day, the very same words strike you like a bell. They sink in as though they had been waiting all along for this particular instant, as though they had been whispering on the edge of your awareness, patient until you were ready to hear. It is almost uncanny, as if the universe itself had arranged a meeting between you and a truth that had been hiding in plain sight. People often imagine that wisdom works like information, that you can simply accumulate it as you do facts in a textbook. But real wisdom does not behave this way. You cannot force it into the mind by will alone, because wisdom is not simply knowledge. It is recognition, a shift in perspective, a new way of seeing what has always been there. And recognition cannot be hurried. Just as you cannot command a seed to sprout before its season, you cannot make a truth blossom within you until something within you is prepared. The soil of your life must be turned, softened, made ready by experiences, by struggles, by longings you cannot quite name. Only then does the seed crack open. Only then does the teaching find you. We do not like to admit this because it challenges our sense of control. We prefer to imagine that we are the masters of our growth, that we can schedule our awakenings as we schedule our appointments. But have you ever noticed that the most important lessons of your life never arrived according to your plans? They arrived through detours, accidents, heartbreaks, moments of despair. They came when you thought you were lost, when you thought you had failed, when you had given up hope. And it was in precisely those moments that something opened a window, a crack, a ray of light breaking through. What once sounded trivial suddenly became profound. What once was invisible suddenly became undeniable. In this sense, the message that reaches you is not external at all. It is not that some stranger's voice, some book, some lecture suddenly becomes magical. It is that you, in your vulnerability, have been prepared to hear it. You and the message are two sides of the same event, inseparable, like the crest and the trough of a single wave. If you had encountered the same words yesterday, they might have meant nothing. If you had encountered them tomorrow, they might have passed you by. But here, now, at this exact moment, they land, they strike. And something in you recognizes that they could not have come a moment sooner or later. This recognition is unsettling because it suggests that our lives are not purely random, nor purely controlled. They move in a mysterious rhythm that we only notice in hindsight. We recall how one encounter led to another, how one disappointment cleared the way for a new opportunity, how one loss prepared us for a deeper love. And in that remembering, we see that what looked like chaos was in fact a kind of dance, as if life itself were weaving a pattern too vast for us to see all at once. When you look back, do you not find that the teachings that mattered most came when you were struggling most? When everything seemed to fall apart, when the future looked uncertain, when you no longer trusted yourself, that is when you were most ready. In comfort, you did not listen. In ease, you did not notice. But in suffering, your defenses cracked, your certainties dissolved, and you became porous enough for something new to enter. It is not that suffering is desirable for its own sake, but that it humbles us, it opens us, it breaks the shell we have built around ourselves. And in that opening, wisdom slips in like water into dry earth. This is why we can say that the teaching finds you, but only because you were also moving toward it all along. Like two rivers flowing from distant mountains, winding separately through valleys and forests, meeting at last in the same sea. You may not have known you were flowing toward this meeting, but the currents of your life carried you here. Every mistake, every success, every heartbreak and joy, each was shaping the channel, deepening the riverbed, until at last the meeting could take place. And when it does, it feels inevitable, as though it had been written in the very grain of reality. We call this synchronicity, or fate, or providence. But these are only words for a deeper mystery, that life itself is not fragmented, but whole. You and the teaching are not separate, not strangers meeting by accident. You are part of the same process, the same unfolding. The words you now hear are not external instructions imposed upon you. They are the echo of your own innermost self, finally reaching your conscious ear. It is like a mirror showing you your own face, which you had somehow forgotten. And when you see it, you realize you have known it all along. But do not think that this recognition means you have now arrived once and for all. For just as one seed sprouts and grows, so another waits in the soil. Life continues to unfold, and new lessons will find you, each at the moment of ripeness. You cannot rush them, and you cannot avoid them. You can only trust that they will come as surely as the seasons change, as surely as the tide returns. To be alive is to be in conversation with reality, and reality never ceases to speak. The irony is that the harder you search for these teachings, the more they seem to evade you. You read desperately, listen endlessly, seek feverishly, and yet feel nothing. And then, when you least expect it, when you have given up searching, when you are simply quiet, they arrive. Why is this? Because seeking with desperation is a kind of grasping, a kind of tension that prevents you from truly hearing. But when you surrender, when you stop demanding that life provide answers on your timetable, you create the space for answers to arise. It is like trying to catch a reflection in water. Stir it with your hand, and the image is distorted. Let it become still, and the reflection appears by itself. So, if you are hearing these words now and they strike you as true, know that it is not an accident. It is not because I have spoken them with special power, but because you are ready. Something in your life has ripened, something in you has softened, and these words land in that soil. And if you are hearing them and they do not yet resonate, that too is not an accident. They may be seeds that lie dormant for now, waiting for the season of your need. Either way, life is at work, in its own time, in its own mysterious rhythm. What matters is not to cling to the words, but to trust the process. Words are only fingers pointing to the moon, never the moon itself. They are signposts along the way, but the way itself is walked in your own steps, in your own life. The teaching does not live in books or lectures or voices, but in the living movement of your awareness. And the awareness that hears these words now is the same awareness that will carry you through every moment to come. You may believe that when a teaching arrives at the right moment, it is because someone else has given you something you lacked. You imagine that wisdom is outside, waiting to be handed down, like a gift wrapped and delivered from another place. But if you look more deeply, you will see that what truly happens is recognition. The words may come from another, but the truth they awaken is your own. It is like seeing your reflection in a mirror. The mirror does not give you a face. It only shows you what was already there. This is why the teachings that move us most often feel strangely familiar. You hear them and you say, "Yes, I knew this, though I never put it into words." You feel as though something you had forgotten is suddenly remembered. And that feeling of remembering is the mark of real wisdom, because wisdom is not the adding of something foreign, but the uncovering of what was hidden. The seed was always in you. The words, the teacher, the moment of crisis were only the rain that awakened it. In this way, life itself is the teacher. Every joy, every sorrow, every accident and triumph is part of the curriculum. Sometimes the lesson comes gently, like a friend offering a hand. Sometimes it comes harshly, like a storm tearing away what you clung to. But always, It comes when you are ready to receive it, whether or not you realize you are ready. You may resist, you may protest, you may even despair, and yet, when you look back later, you see that the timing was perfect, that without that experience you would never have awakened to the truth that now sustains you. To see this is to relax the grip of fear. For most of us spend our lives afraid that we are missing out, that we are behind, that we should have already known, already succeeded, already become. But life is not late, nor is it early. It is always on time. The message arrives when it is needed, not when the ego demands it. And so the teaching you hear now, at this exact moment, is precisely what belongs to you now. Tomorrow, another will come, and so it goes, endlessly unfolding, endlessly ripening. Think of the seasons. The tree does not bear fruit in winter, nor does it cling to its leaves in autumn. Each stage has its own necessity, its own beauty. In the same way, your life unfolds in seasons of growth, of loss, of waiting, of abundance. To demand fruit when the branches are bare is to suffer needlessly. To trust the cycle is to see that nothing is wasted, nothing is out of place. Even the falling of the leaves, even the emptiness of winter is part of the renewal. So too with the teachings that reach you. They come in their season, not before, not after. They come when you are open enough, tender enough, broken enough, or strong enough to hear them. And when they come, they awaken in you not something alien, but the deeper part of yourself that was waiting to be remembered. The truth has always been yours. The timing is life's. And perhaps this is why we often say, the universe is speaking to me. What we mean is that we sense an uncanny fit between our inner need and the outer event. A phrase in a book, a line in a song, a chance conversation, it lands with such precision that it feels orchestrated. But the orchestra is not outside you. It is the unity of inside and outside. The recognition that what appears in the world and what arises in you are not two, but one. The synchronicity is not a message sent from elsewhere, but the expression of wholeness revealing itself. If you can see this, then you realize that nothing is ever truly wasted. Even the messages you ignored years ago, even the teachings that seemed meaningless at the time, are part of the unfolding. They were seeds scattered in the soil. Some sprouted quickly, others lay dormant, waiting for rain. And when the rain comes, even decades later, the seed awakens as though no time had passed. Life does not forget. It waits. This understanding changes how you approach the present. Instead of grasping desperately at every teaching, fearing that you must capture them all, you can relax. What is meant for you will not miss you. What you are not ready for will simply pass by, and that too is fine. You do not need to force the process. You only need to live attentively, to be present, to allow life to work upon you as it always has. The rest will take care of itself. And here lies the final paradox. When you see that the message always finds you when you most need it, you realize that you never needed the message at all. For what it points to is the awareness that has always been here, the awareness listening now, the awareness that is the thread running through every moment of your life. The teaching is not the truth, you are. The words are only reminders, echoes, invitations. What they awaken is the recognition that you are inseparable from life, that you are the dance itself, not a separate dancer trying to learn the steps. Imagine for a moment that life is a vast ocean. Each wave rises, falls, and dissolves back into the sea. A wave does not need to be told how to rise or how to fall. It is carried by the ocean's movement. In the same way, you do not need to be told how to live. You are already living. You are already the expression of life's movement. The teachings that reach you simply remind you of what you already are, the ocean waving here and now. And when you see this, the anxiety begins to dissolve. You no longer worry that you are behind, that you have missed your chance, that the wisdom you needed has passed you by. For how could you miss what you already are? How could you be late to your own being? Whatever comes, comes in its time. Whatever does not come, was never meant for this season. To trust this is to rest in the unfolding, to surrender the constant demand for answers, and to discover that the answers are already present in the silence of awareness itself. So, when you hear these words, take them not as instructions to be followed, but as reminders of what you already know. Let them wash over you as waves wash the shore, not grasping, not clinging, not analyzing. If they resonate, it is because the time has come. If they do not, it is because another time will. Either way, life is speaking and you are listening, because you and life are not two. You are the same movement, the same mystery, the same awareness looking at itself through countless eyes, and perhaps that is the deepest teaching of all, that nothing is missing, nothing is wasted, nothing is out of place. The message finds you when you most need it, because you and the message are the same. The giver and the receiver are one. The timing is perfect because there is no other time. There is only this, now, endlessly appearing, endlessly sufficient.
Your home is not merely a collection of walls and furniture. It is the space where you breathe without worry, where you can finally take off the mask you wear for the world. It is the one place where life should be allowed to flow naturally, like water finding its own level. And yet, how often do we invite into this sacred space people who disturb that flow, people who bring with them the weight of their anxieties, their judgments, their endless need to control and manipulate. There are certain types of people, you see, who carry with them a kind of psychic pollution, not because they are evil or malicious in some dramatic sense, but because they have not yet learned to let life be. They are still fighting with reality, still insisting that the universe should conform to their narrow expectations. And when such people enter your home, they bring that fight with them. They bring the tension, the resistance, the constant low-grade anxiety that makes peace impossible. Let me tell you about the first type, the chronic complainer. This is the person who walks through your door and immediately begins to catalogue everything that is wrong with the world. The weather is too hot or too cold. The traffic was unbearable. Their boss is an idiot. Their neighbor is inconsiderate. The government is corrupt. On and on it goes, an endless litany of grievances. Now you might think, this is simply someone having a bad day, venting their frustrations. But watch closely. This is not occasional venting. This is their natural state. They have made a lifestyle out of being bothered by life. They wake up in the morning looking for things to complain about. They go to bed at night, rehearsing their complaints for tomorrow. What they have forgotten, or perhaps never learned, is that complaining about reality is like shaking your fist at the rain. The rain does not care. It is not against you, it is just rain. The chronic complainer treats life as a personal insult. Everything that does not match their preferences becomes evidence that the universe is somehow failing them. But here is what they do not see. Their complaints are not observations about the world. They are revelations about their own mind. They are showing you that they have not yet learned the art of acceptance, the ability to say yes to what is. And when you invite such a person into your home, they bring this poisonous perspective with them. Suddenly your comfortable chair is not quite right. Your coffee is too weak or too strong. Your choice of music is questionable. Nothing is ever quite good enough, because they have trained themselves to focus exclusively on what is wrong, rather than what is simply present. But here is the deeper problem. Complaining is contagious. It spreads like a virus. You begin the afternoon feeling peaceful, content with your simple life. The complainer arrives, and within an hour you too are noticing all the little imperfections, all the things that could be better, all the ways in which life is not measuring up to some imaginary standard, the peace you felt has evaporated, replaced by a vague sense of dissatisfaction. This is why you must keep the chronic complainer away from your home, not because you are cruel or uncaring, but because you understand that your home must be a sanctuary. It must be a place where you can practice acceptance, where you can let life be exactly as it is, without the constant commentary of judgment. The second type of person to keep away is the energy vampire. This is someone who enters your space and immediately begins to drain your vitality. They do not do this consciously or with malicious intent. They are not rubbing their hands together, thinking about how to steal your energy. No, it is far more subtle than that. The energy vampire is someone who has not learned to generate their own sense of well-being. They are constantly looking outside themselves for validation, for attention, for proof that they matter. And so they latch onto others like a drowning person clutching at a life preserver. You can recognize them by how you feel after they leave. You feel exhausted, depleted, as if you've been carrying a heavy weight, because in a sense, you have been. They have been unconsciously dumping their emotional burdens onto you, expecting you to carry what they refuse to carry themselves. They will monopolize the conversation, talking endlessly about their problems, their dramas, their latest crisis. But notice something, they do not actually want solutions. If you offer practical advice, they will immediately explain why it will not work. If you suggest a new perspective, they will cling even more tightly to their victim story. This is because their real need is not for help. Their real need is for attention. They have discovered that the being in crisis, being troubled, being overwhelmed gives them a steady supply of concern from others, makes them feel important, needed, central to someone's attention. And so they perpetuate their own suffering because it has become their currency. When such a person sits in your home, they suck all the oxygen out of the room. Everything becomes about them, their feelings, their needs, their endless internal drama. You cannot relax because you are constantly being pulled into their emotional whirlpool. You cannot simply be because they are demanding that you do something, fix something, validate something. And the tragedy is that no matter how much you give, it is never enough. Because the hole they are trying to fill cannot be filled from the outside. It can only be filled when they finally turn inward and discover their own completeness. But until that happens, they will continue to drain everyone around them, leaving behind a trail of exhausted and frustrated people. Your home cannot be a place of peace if it becomes a dumping ground for other people's unprocessed emotions. This is not selfishness. This is basic self-preservation. You cannot help anyone if you are yourself depleted. You cannot offer genuine compassion if you are resentful of being used. The third type is the person who treats your home as a stage for their performance. This is someone who cannot simply be present. They must always be performing, always proving something, always seeking applause. They walk through your door and immediately begin to tell you about their latest achievement, their recent purchase, their impressive connection with someone important. Every conversation becomes an opportunity for them to showcase how successful, how clever, how special they are. They are like peacocks spreading their feathers, except peacocks have the excuse of genuine beauty. This person has confused their role in life with their actual identity. They think they are their accomplishments, their possessions, their social status. They have built an elaborate costume, and now they must constantly maintain it, constantly remind everyone of how impressive it is. The exhaustion of this is palpable. What they do not understand is that true presence requires no performance. A flower does not try to be beautiful. It simply opens, and its beauty is evident. A child does not rehearse being playful. The playfulness flows naturally from their being. But this person has forgotten how to simply be. They have become so identified with their act that they no longer know who they are without it. And when they enter your home, they turn your living room into their theater. They need an audience. And you become that audience whether you wish to or not. You cannot have a genuine conversation because they are not really listening. They are waiting for their next cue, their next opportunities, to bring the spotlight back to themselves. This creates a peculiar kind of loneliness. You are sitting with someone, sharing space with them, and yet there is no real meeting. Because they are not actually there, they are too busy managing their performance to be present to what is actually happening. You might as well be talking to a well-rehearsed recording. Your home should be a place where masks can come off, where people can stop performing and simply exist. But the performer cannot do this. They are terrified of being seen without their costume because they believe the costume is all they are. And so your home becomes just another venue for their exhausting show. Keep them away, not with anger or judgment, but with the simple recognition that you need space where authenticity is possible. You need a place where people can be ordinary, where the pressure to impress is released, where genuine human connection can occur. The fourth type is the person who lives in constant comparison. They walk into your home and immediately begin measuring. Is your home bigger than theirs? Is your furniture nicer? Do you have something they do not have? And equally, do they have things you lack? Their mind is like an accountant's ledger, constantly tallying who is winning and who is losing in the game of life. But here is what they have not realized. Nobody is keeping score except them. Life is not a competition, it is a dance. And you cannot dance if you are too busy checking whether you are dancing better than everyone else. This person cannot simply enjoy what is present because they are always comparing it to something else. They cannot appreciate your hospitality because they are mentally comparing it to other people's hospitality. They cannot relax in your company because they are too busy evaluating whether you are more successful than them or less successful, richer or poorer, happier or sadder. This makes genuine friendship impossible because friendship requires a basic equality, a recognition that we are all human beings, stumbling through existence together. But the compara has divided the world into winners and losers, the superior and the inferior, and they are constantly anxious about which category they fall into. When they sit in your home, you can feel their assessment happening. They are not really seeing you. They are seeing how you measure up to their internal standards. They are not appreciating your home. They are comparing it to some ideal in their mind or to other homes they have visited. Nothing is experienced directly. Everything is filtered through this exhausting process of comparison. And this attitude is infectious. Before long, you find yourself comparing too. You start to see your own home through their judgmental eyes. That comfortable chair you loved suddenly seems shabby. That painting you enjoyed now seems amateurish. The contentment you felt has been replaced by a vague sense of inadequacy. This is the poison of comparison. It takes what is simple and good and turns it into a source of anxiety. It takes what is enough and makes it seem lacking. It steals the present moment and replaces it with an endless measurement against imaginary standards. Your home must be protected from this energy. The fifth and perhaps most dangerous type is the person who brings drama wherever they go. Their life is an endless soap opera, and they need you to play a supporting role. There is always a crisis, always a conflict, always an emergency that requires immediate attention. They thrive on chaos because chaos makes them feel alive. Ordinary peaceful existence feels flat to them, boring. And so they unconsciously create turmoil. They pick fights, they stir up trouble, they turn molehills into mountains. And then they draw everyone around them into their manufactured drama. These people have not learned that peace is not the absence of stimulation. It is the presence of harmony. They think that excitement requires conflict. that intensity requires crisis. They have confused the adrenaline rush of drama with actual vitality. When such a person enters your home, suddenly small things become large. They amplify everything, turning the volume up on life until the noise becomes unbearable. And here is their trick. They make you feel responsible for their drama. If you do not react strongly enough, you are unsupportive. If you suggest they are overreacting, you are uninvalidating their feelings. They have learned to use emotional manipulation to keep everyone engaged with their chaos. But watch what happens if you refuse to participate. If you remain calm, if you do not feed the drama with your reaction, they become frustrated. Because they need your participation. They need your shock, your concern, your agitation to fuel their performance. Without it, the drama deflates. Your home cannot be a theater for other people's chaos. It must be a refuge from the noise of the world, not an amplifier of it. It must be a place where calm can exist, where simple moments can unfold without being interrupted by manufactured crisis. So these are the 5 types. The chronic complainer who cannot accept what is, the energy vampire who drains your vitality, the performer who cannot stop the show, the comparer who cannot simply appreciate, and the drama creator who cannot live in peace. Now, I am not suggesting you become cold or unkind. I am not saying you should judge these people harshly or treat them with contempt. Remember, they too are struggling. They too are caught in their own patterns, their own unconscious habits. They are doing the best they know how with the understanding they have. But understanding their struggle does not mean you must sacrifice your own peace. Compassion does not require you to be a doormat. You can care about someone while also recognizing that their presence in your space is harmful to your well-being. Think of it this way. If someone had a contagious illness, you would not invite them into your home. Not because you hate them, but because you understand that protecting your health is necessary. The patterns I have described are also contagious, but they infect your psychological and spiritual health rather than your physical body. Your home is your temple, your sanctuary, the space where you can finally stop fighting and simply be. It must be protected, not with walls and locks, but with wisdom and discernment. You must learn to recognize what energies nourish life and what energies deplete it. This does not mean your home becomes a fortress of isolation. It means it becomes a garden, carefully tended, where only life-giving elements are invited in. A place where genuine connection can happen, where laughter is real rather than nervous, where silence is comfortable rather than awkward, where people can take off their masks because the pressure to perform has been lifted. When you keep these 5 types away from your home, something wonderful happens. The space begins to clear, like muddy water settling when left alone. The constant noise quiets. The tension releases. And in that clearing, you rediscover what it means to simply live. You find yourself breathing more deeply. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw unclenches. The constant vigilance relaxes because you are no longer having to manage other people's dysfunction. You are free to just be, to drink your tea, to watch the light change, to hear the birds, to exist without commentary or drama or performance. And here is the beautiful part. When your home becomes this kind of sanctuary, you become more available for genuine connection because you are no longer depleted by toxic interactions. You have more energy for real friendship. Because you are no longer surrounded by complainers, you can appreciate the people who show up with gratitude. Because you are no longer hosting performers, you can welcome those who are comfortable being ordinary. Your home becomes a place that reflects your values, your priorities, your understanding of what life is really about. It becomes a living statement that says, I choose peace over drama, presence over performance, acceptance over complaint, Generosity over energy vampirism. Appreciation over comparison. This is not about being perfect or having the ideal home. It is about recognizing that the energy you allow into your space matters. It shapes your consciousness. It affects your peace. It determines whether your home is a place of restoration.
Isn't it curious? The more you give yourself away, the less you are truly seen. If the sun never set, we would cease to notice its light. If a bird sang without pause, its song would dissolve into noise. But the moment you step back, the moment you withdraw into silence, suddenly your presence takes on weight. People feel the shape of your absence, and in that very emptiness, you are valued again. This is one of life's delicious paradoxes. What is constant becomes invisible, what is scarce becomes precious. I don't mean trickery, nor the silly business of playing hard to get. That is just another mask. What I mean is the art of honoring your own presence, of moving with the same rhythm you find in the tides, in the waxing and waning of the moon. For even nature does not give itself all at once, nor all the time. Whatever is constant and without limit soon feels ordinary. Its gift lies not in burning without end, but in the rhythm of rising and falling, appearing and disappearing. If the sun never set, we would soon grow weary of its light and long for shadow. So it is with you. Your presence has power because it comes and goes like the tides that advance and recede, like love that breathes in closeness and in distance. Respect is born not from endless exposure, but from the spaces in between. Have you noticed how quickly generosity turns into expectation? The one who always says yes is soon taken for granted, while the one who withholds at times is cherished when they appear. It is not about virtue, but about balance. To step back is to remember your humanity. You are not a machine, but a rhythm, like the sea that ebbs and flows, like the moon that waxes and wanes. For life itself is not a straight line, but a dance of presence and absence. Isn't it strange? The moment you cease to be forever at hand, the relationship takes on new life. For when you are not always there, people no longer treat you as furniture in the room, but as a presence to be encountered. They lean closer. They listen. They treasure the passing moment. Even your silence, even your absence begins to speak. We only notice the sweetness of water when it grows scarce. When it gushes everywhere, it is wasted and ignored. But when it is drawn from a deep well, each sip is savored. So it is with your presence. If you flood the world with yourself, you wash away your value. But when you come and go like the tide, your presence refreshes like cool water in the desert. From childhood, we are taught to smile, to nod, to say yes, mistaking obedience for affection and availability for love. Yet love, like a garden, needs space to breathe. Too much rain drowns it, too much sun withers it. It flourishes in rhythm, not excess. Absence is not emptiness, but the interval that gives shape. Just as music is made not only of notes, but of the silence between them, so too love ripens in the dance of nearness and distance. Without the pauses, all dissolves into noise. Life is like a melody. And so if you never step back, never say no, you too become noise. Seen but not noticed, heard but not listened to. Value lies in the interval, the well-placed absence. This is not neglect, but rhythm. The tree does not bear fruit in every season. Fire does not burn forever. It must die down so it can be kindled again. Even breath itself depends on exhaling as well as inhaling. Why imagine you must give without rest? When you withdraw and return, your presence gathers weight, like the hush that makes the bells strike resound. And here is the paradox. By making yourself less available, you become more real. People meet your wholeness, not the fragments you scatter. Like the man who speaks rarely, it is not his words that are louder, but his silence that makes them precious. So it is with your presence. Given without pause, it is diluted. Held with rhythm, it gathers intensity. This is why stepping back is sometimes the most loving act of all. Look at love itself. Lovers who clutch too tightly smother the flame, while those who vanish altogether let the fire die. The art lies in rhythm, closeness and distance, voice and silence, embrace and release. Notice how the man who is seldom available is the one most carefully attended, not because his busyness is a virtue, but because his time carries weight. If he gives you a moment, it feels like a gift, for it has not been scattered like seed on barren ground. Contrast this with the one who is forever waiting, forever bending, whose presence is taken for granted precisely because it is always at hand. This is not a question of superiority, but of recognition. When you honor the worth of your own hours, others are compelled to honor them too. But if you spend them carelessly, the world will treat them as trifles. And so, to stop being always available is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the quiet refusal to leap at every summons, to patch every quarrel that is not yours, to serve as the eternal remedy for other people's restlessness. It is to stand rooted in yourself, and from that stillness to act when the moment is right. For your life is not meant to be endlessly consumed, but to be lived, richly, deeply, sincerely. And only from such fullness can you give in a way that nourishes, rather than exhausts. Now here is something quite remarkable. When you cease to be endlessly available, you begin to hear your own life again. For in forever tending to others, you drown the small secret music within. Your days are filled with clamor, but your soul remains unheard. Step back and suddenly you catch the whispers, the quiet callings, the subtle joys, the long-buried desires that rise like forgotten seeds breaking through the soil. To be available to yourself is the beginning of authenticity, and without authenticity, love itself becomes counterfeit. Every yes that betrays your own being is in truth a silent no, and from such denials only resentment can grow. There was a man who spent himself in the service of others, giving until he was emptied. Yet for all his sacrifice, he remained unseen. At last, exhausted, he stepped back. And only then did the world protest. They called him selfish, cold, neglectful. But slowly, something curious began to happen. In his absence, they began to feel the weight he had long carried. For the first time, his presence was no longer taken for granted, but respected. In stepping back, he had not lost love at all. He had opened the door for love to appear, where once there had only been convenience. So you see, to become less available is not an act of rejection, but of invitation. It is the invitation for others to wake up to your presence, and for you to wake up to yourself. For only in the open space between two beings can respect take root and love draw breath. When you are forever at hand, no one stops to wonder who you are or what you truly give. But when you withdraw, when you refuse to play the endless part, suddenly they must pause. They must look. And in that moment of seeing, the whole pattern begins to shift. Why, then, is this so hard? Because we are frightened. We imagine that a single no will banish love. We fear that if we step aside, we shall be forgotten. We tremble that if we honor our own worth, others will not. But ask yourself, if someone values you only so long as you are endlessly at their disposal, is that love, or is it merely convenience? Much of our suffering, you see, is not caused by what others do to us, but by what we permit. Out of fear of displeasing, we stretch ourselves thin, we give beyond our means, we say yes when the heart cries no, and then we cloak this self-betrayal under the name of kindness. But it is no kindness to betray yourself. To give what you do not have is like offering an empty bowl. True kindness flows only from fullness, and fullness requires form. To cease being endlessly available is to honor that form. To say, I am human, I have rhythm, I have worth. And yes, some may drift away when you step back, but then you discover a deeper truth. They were not with you at all, but with the endless fountain they mistook you for. Better to be cherished for your reality than tolerated for your exhaustion. Better to lose those who drained you than to lose yourself altogether. And here again the paradox shows its face. Those who truly matter, those who truly love, will not vanish when you step back. They will bend with you, as trees bend with the wind. They will grow into the space you create, and in that very movement, the bond deepens. So when you cease to be forever at hand, you do not become less, you become more visible, more authentic, more real. You gather together the scattered fragments of yourself and return as a whole being, and life always bows to wholeness. For wholeness has its own gravity. It draws, it attracts, it commands respect without demanding it. The broken self clamors to be noticed, while the whole self is noticed without effort. You cease to be background noise and become the very music to which others listen. Picture yourself as a well. If all may draw without end, the waters will one day vanish, and both you and they will be left thirsty. But when the well is guarded, when it is given time to fill again from its hidden springs, then those who come to drink find refreshment. To withdraw at times, to cease being endlessly available, is simply to keep the waters of your life pure and flowing. This is not selfishness, but the very condition that makes giving possible. From a full well, the water is sweet. From a dry one, nothing can be drawn. Yet the world will not at first thank you for this. Those who were accustomed to your endless flow will call you selfish, accuse you of change, and indeed you have changed. You are no longer a tool to be used, but a being who gives from freedom. This unsettles those who lived upon your weakness, but it strengthens those who honor your strength. In time, the numbers may grow fewer, but the bonds grow deeper. For love that is real does not fear your boundary. It bows to it. So then we come to this curious question. Who are you when you're not forever on call, forever answering the ring of the world? Who are you when you sit still, when you stop chasing, when you listen to the hum inside your own skull? Most of us forget, you see, because we're so busy being useful to others that we've misplaced ourselves. But in the silence, in that delicious nothing, you suddenly stumble upon yourself again. And far from being empty, it's wonderfully full. To withdraw is not to desert life, but to return to it. For in stepping back, you discover that life is like breathing in and out. If you only breathe out, you collapse. If you only give, you dry up. The rhythm of the tide is the rhythm of being. You see? It's the old paradox. In not seeking, things come to you. In not clutching, they remain. And so, curiously, when you stop demanding respect, people respect you. When you cease to be always available, you become truly present. You don't have to insist on your worth, you are it. So, the game is not about being endlessly busy, endlessly agreeable. It's about rhythm, sincerity, wholeness. Say yes when it's a real yes, say no when it's a real no. Step forward when you're full, step back when it's time to fill. That isn't selfishness. That's simply the wisdom of the dance. And then, as if by magic, life begins to keep the beat with you.
Now, let me tell you something about seeing people clearly. We spend so much time looking at others, judging them, forming opinions, deciding who they are and what they're worth. But most of what we see is costume and mask. We see the performance, the act, the carefully constructed image that people present to the world. And we mistake this for reality. But there are two things, just two simple things, that will show you who someone really is. Not what they say they are, not what they hope to be or what they wish you would think of them, but what they actually are, underneath all the pretense and posturing. The first thing to watch is how they behave when there's nothing in it for them, when there's no audience to impress, no reward to chase, no advantage to gain. Do they still show up? Do they still care? Do they still act with decency and kindness? Or does the whole performance collapse the moment the spotlight moves away? You see, most people are quite wonderful when it serves their interests. The salesman is charming when he wants your money. The politician is compassionate when he wants your vote. The lover is attentive when he wants your affection. But what happens when the transaction is complete? What happens when there's nothing more to get from you? This is when the mask slips. This is when you see the real person standing there, perhaps confused that they even have to keep pretending now that the deal is done. Watch how someone treats the waiter who has already brought the food. Watch how they speak to the person who has no power over them, who can offer them nothing, who is simply another human being standing before them. I remember watching a man once in a restaurant. He was quite important, or at least he thought he was. Important job, expensive suit, the whole production. And he was dining with someone equally impressive, someone who could advance his career. You should have seen the performance. The smiles, the laughter, the careful attention to every word his companion spoke. He was the very picture of charm and consideration. But when the waiter came to refill his water, he didn't even glance up. When the busboy bumped his chair by accident, he snapped at him without breaking his conversation with the important person. The young man who brought more bread to the table might as well have been invisible. And right there, in those tiny moments that he thought didn't matter, his true character revealed itself. Because you see, character is not what you do when people are watching. Character is what you do when no one important is looking. When there's no credit to claim, no reputation to protect, no game to win. That's when the truth comes out, like water finding its level. The second thing to watch, and this is equally important, is what amuses them, what makes them laugh. Not the polite laughter of social occasions, but the genuine, spontaneous laughter that bubbles up when they forget to control it, because laughter is one of the most honest things about us. When someone laughs at cruelty, at the misfortune of others, at jokes that demean and diminish, you're seeing something real. They can say all the right things about compassion and kindness. They can speak beautifully about justice and fairness. But if they're giggling at someone else's pain, if they find humor in humiliation, if they're amused by meanness disguised as wit, then you know what's actually living in their heart. I once knew a woman who spoke constantly about her love of humanity, about her dedication to helping others, about her spiritual nature. She had all the right books on her shelf, all the right ideas in her head. But she would laugh, really laugh, when someone told stories about making others feel small. When someone described an embarrassing moment for another person, her eyes would light up. When gossip turned cruel, she leaned in closer. And there it was, the real person, showing herself in those unguarded moments of laughter. Because you can control your words, you can manage your image, you can present yourself as anything you wish to appear to be. But laughter is involuntary. It comes from somewhere deeper than the thinking mind, somewhere more honest than the performing self. Show me what makes a person laugh, and I'll show you what they really value. Show me what they find funny, and I'll show you what they truly believe about the world and the people in it. The person who laughs with genuine joy, at kindness, at absurdity, at the playful innocence of life, they're revealing something beautiful. The person who laughs at suffering, at weakness, at the struggles of others, they're revealing something else entirely.
Now you might say this seems too simple. Surely understanding someone's character is more complex than watching two things. And yes, humans are complex creatures. We contain multitudes. We contradict ourselves. We're capable of both cruelty and compassion, sometimes in the same afternoon. But these two things, how people behave when there's nothing to gain, and what genuinely amuses them, these cut through all the complexity. They bypass the thinking mind, the strategic self, the image maker. They show you what happens when the controls are off, when the guard is down, when the person simply is, rather than tried to be. Think about it this way. Every person you meet is performing a role to some degree. They're playing the part of the successful professional, the devoted friend, the spiritual seeker, the sophisticated person, whatever identity they've constructed. And some of these performances are quite convincing. People can maintain them for years. But the performance requires effort. It requires attention. It requires the person to remember their lines and hit their marks. And there are moments, brief moments, when the effort relaxes, when they forget to act, when they simply react. Those moments when there's nothing to gain, that's when the effort drops. Why pretend for the waiter? Why be kind to the janitor? Why treat the homeless person with dignity? There's nothing in it for you. And so if the kindness was only ever a costume, it comes off. But if the kindness is real, if it comes from something deeper than strategy, then it continues. It flows naturally. Because it's not work to be kind. It's simply what you are. And those moments of laughter, those are equally unguarded. Laughter happens too quickly for the strategic mind to catch. It erupts before you can think about how it looks or what it says about you, and so it reveals what's actually there, underneath all the careful construction of image. I'm not talking about occasional slips. Everyone has bad days. Everyone has moments of impatience or thoughtlessness. What I'm pointing to is the pattern, the consistent way someone shows up when they think the moment doesn't count, the habitual response they have to other people's pain or joy. There was a teacher I knew once, years ago, who was famous for his wisdom and compassion. Students would travel great distances to learn from him. He spoke beautifully about love and understanding and the interconnectedness of all beings. And for a long time I was quite impressed by him. But then I started to notice small things. The way he would ignore the people who cooked his meals and cleaned his rooms. The way he would dismiss questions from students he considered less intelligent. The way he would laugh, a particular kind of sharp laughter, when someone made a mistake or appeared foolish. And gradually I realized that all his beautiful words were just words. The real man, the one who existed when there was no benefit to being the wise teacher, was someone else entirely. Someone impatient with anyone who couldn't serve his image. Someone who found amusement in the stumbling of others. The contrast between his performance and his reality was so stark that it became almost comical. Here was a man teaching about compassion, while treating the people right in front of him with casual indifference. Here was a man speaking about the illusion of the ego, while carefully maintaining his own image as the enlightened master. And the saddest part was not his hypocrisy, though that was sad enough. The saddest part was that he seemed to genuinely believe his own performance. He thought the role he was playing was who he actually was. This is what happens when we don't pay attention to these two things. We get lost in the story people tell about themselves. We believe the performance. We confuse the actor with the role, and then we're surprised when the person we thought we knew turns out to be someone entirely different. But if you watch how someone behaves when there's nothing in it for them, you won't be surprised. You'll see clearly. You'll know who you're dealing with. And if you notice what genuinely amuses them, what makes them laugh when they forget to control it, you'll understand what's actually living in their heart. Now here's something interesting.
Once you start paying attention to these two things, you'll also start noticing them in yourself. You'll catch yourself being short with someone who can't advance your interests. You'll notice yourself laughing at something cruel or mean-spirited. And in those moments, you'll see your own character revealing itself. This is actually good news because you can't change what you don't see. As long as you're identified with your own performance, as long as you believe your carefully constructed image is who you really are, you're stuck. But when you start to see the gap between the role and the reality, between who you pretend to be and who you actually are, then something can shift. You might discover that you're kinder than you thought in some ways and less kind than you believed in others. You might find that what amuses you says something about your values that you hadn't quite admitted to yourself. This seeing, this honest looking at yourself without the filter of self-justification, is the beginning of real change. Because character is not fixed. It's not something you're born with and stuck with forever. Character is like a muscle. Every time you refuse to laugh at cruelty, even when everyone else is laughing, you're making a choice about who you want to be. But you have to see first. You have to be willing to look at how you actually behave, not how you think you behave or wish you behaved. You have to be willing to notice what actually makes you laugh, not what you think should make you laugh. And the same applies to understanding others. We can't see people clearly if we're only looking at their performance. We have to watch the small moments, the unguarded reactions, the times when they forget to manage their image. That's where the truth lives. So here's what I'm suggesting. For the next while, when you meet someone, notice how they treat people who can do nothing for them. Do they see the person cleaning the floor? Do they thank the person who holds the door? Do they speak kindly to the child who interrupts their important conversation? And notice what makes them laugh. Is their humor generous or mean? Do they find joy in life's absurdities or in other people's failures? Do they laugh with people or at them? You'll be amazed at what you discover. You'll see through so many performances. You'll understand people with a clarity that seemed impossible before. And perhaps most importantly, you'll start to see yourself more clearly too. The art of seeing character is really very simple. Don't listen to what people say. Listen to what makes them laugh when they forget to control themselves. Everything else is just theater, just costume and mask. But these two things, these will show you the truth every time. And once you can see clearly, you can choose clearly. Not based on their performance, but based on who they actually are when the curtain comes down and the audience goes home. This is not about judging others, this is about seeing clearly, about recognizing reality instead of believing in fantasies, about understanding that the most important thing about any person is not what they claim to be, but what they actually are in the small moments that they think don't count. Because those moments count more than anything else.
There are moments, sometimes quiet, sometimes aching, when one looks over the shoulder of time and wonders what it was all for. You wake up one day and realize that years have passed, and somehow the grand story you thought you were writing seems to have slipped through your fingers. Perhaps you did everything you were told you should do. You worked hard, you stayed busy, you followed the path that others laid before you. Yet still, there is this haunting whisper that asks, was this it? It can be a very strange and lonely feeling, this sense that you have wasted something as sacred as your own life. Because you see, we are all taught that life is something to be used, something to be directed toward a purpose, something that must amount to something in the end. And so we chase after the idea of meaning like a man chasing his own shadow. But the more you run after it, the further it seems to recede. This idea of waste only appears when we measure life by a story we believe it should have followed. You were supposed to be somewhere by now. You were supposed to have done something, become someone, proven something. And yet here you are, standing still, looking at the world and feeling as if everyone else is moving ahead while you are being quietly left behind. But the strange thing about that feeling is that it never quite tells the truth. Because what if what you call wasting your life is only your life refusing to be wasted on the wrong things? What if your stillness is not failure, but rest? What if the roads you didn't take were simply the ones that were never yours to walk? You see, we live in a world obsessed with progress. Everything around us is designed to convince you that you must constantly be moving towards something, producing something, improving something, achieving something. But in that endless striving, you forget how to be. You forget that the meaning of life is not found at the end of a path, but in the simple act of walking. The oak tree does not rush to grow. The clouds do not hurry across the sky to arrive at a destination. And yet, we are convinced that stillness means stagnation, that silence means absence, that not knowing means failure. The idea that you have wasted your life is built on a comparison. You look at what others have done, what they have achieved, where they are, and then you measure your own existence against their imagined success. But comparison is a trick of the mind. It turns life into a contest, when in truth it was never a race at all. You are not running toward meaning, you are meaning unfolding. Consider this. If a flower were to bloom at midnight, hidden from every eye, would it still be beautiful? Would its fragrance be any less sweet because no one saw it? The flower does not bloom to be seen. It blooms because blooming is its nature. In the same way, your life does not need to be seen, measured, or admired to be worthwhile. You exist because the universe willed it so. And that, by itself, is enough. The feeling that life has been wasted often arises when the story you told yourself about who you were supposed to become begins to fall apart. But every story must dissolve for truth to appear. There comes a moment when the masks grow heavy, when the ambitions no longer excite you, when the old dreams start to feel like clothes that no longer fit. And that moment, though it feels like despair, is actually the beginning of something miraculous. It is the unraveling of illusion. For so long you believed you were on your way to somewhere, but where exactly? You were never truly going anywhere, because you were never truly separate from the place you longed to reach. You are already there. The journey was never about arriving. It was about realizing that you had been home all along. Many people come to this realization late in life, sometimes after decades of striving. They wake up one morning, see the lines on their face, the gray in their hair, and they think, what was it all for? They look at the possessions, the status, the roles they played, and none of it feels real anymore. And that can be a terrifying moment, but it can also be the first true breath of freedom you have ever taken. Because when you no longer believe you must become someone else to be worthy, you begin to live. Let me tell you a small story. There was once a monk who spent his entire life searching for enlightenment. He meditated for years, fasted, studied sacred texts, and traveled from teacher to teacher. Yet peace always seemed to elude him. One day, exhausted and old, he gave up. He sat beneath a tree and said to himself, I have wasted my life. But as he sat there, a gentle breeze passed through the leaves, and he noticed the sound of the wind, the sunlight flickering through the branches, the simple stillness of the world. In that moment, he began to laugh, because he realized that all along he had been searching for something that had never been lost. The same is true for you. You cannot waste your life any more than you can waste the sky. You may delay awareness, but the totality of life remains untouched by your choices. Even the mistakes, even the regrets, are part of the great unfolding. Nothing is outside of it. Nothing is wasted. You see, your idea of waste depends on your idea of time. You imagine a line, a past behind you and a future ahead, and you judge where you stand along that line. But time is not a line. It is a dance. The past is not gone. It is alive in you now as memory, as experience, as the invisible current shaping this very moment. The future is not waiting. It is already being born through your thoughts your breath, your presence. And this moment, this one right now, is eternity disguised as now. So when you say, I have wasted my life, what you are really saying is, I have not noticed that life has always been here, because it has. It never went anywhere. Regret is the mind's way of trying to rewrite a story that was never yours to control. It is an echo of resistance, a refusal to accept the perfection of imperfection. But the moment you stop arguing with your past, the moment you allow every mistake to simply be part of the fabric of what made you, a quiet peace begins to emerge. That peace is not indifference. It is understanding. Perhaps you feel you spent too long in the wrong job, or loved the wrong person, or chased dreams that dissolved into dust. But what if none of that was wrong? What if each step, each heartbreak, each detour was essential in leading you to this very awareness? Life, after all, is not a straight path. It spirals, it loops, it doubles back, it confuses you on purpose so that you may eventually see the futility of trying to control it. And once you see that, a beautiful thing happens. You stop trying to win life. You begin to live it. The great error of modern man is that he measures his worth in productivity. You are not a machine. You are a mystery. You are not meant to function efficiently. You are meant to experience deeply. You are meant to feel the full weight of being alive, the joy, the loss, the uncertainty, the beauty, the grief. Every part of it is sacred. If you could only step back and see your life not as a series of failures or missed opportunities, but as a single piece of art, a painting in progress, you would realize that even the dark strokes are necessary for the light to shine. The contrast is what gives the picture depth. Perhaps you cannot see it now, but someday you will. You will look back and see that nothing was wasted. Every wrong turn led you home. Every heartbreak opened your heart a little wider. Every delay prepared you for what could not be rushed. The truth is that life cannot be wasted, because life is not a possession. You cannot lose what you never owned. You can only forget that it was never yours to control. So, if you feel you have wasted your life, I invite you to look closer. Look at the way the light falls on your hands. Look at the breath moving through your chest. Look at the small, miraculous act of awareness that allows you to even ask this question. This moment, right here, is your life, and it is whole. When you truly see that, something within you softens. The tension of regret begins to dissolve, and in its place comes a deep, unshakable peace. Not the peace of escape, but the peace of recognition. Because the truth is, you were never off track. There is no track. There is only this infinite unfolding, and you are part of it, now and forever. That is where healing begins. That is where the illusion of waste ends. When you begin to sense that perhaps nothing was wasted, the mind doesn't easily surrender its habit of measuring. It will try to find a new way to evaluate, a quieter scale upon which to weigh the worth of your days. It might whisper, all right, perhaps I didn't waste my life, but surely I should be further along by now. You see, even when you stop running, the mind still wants a finish line. But there isn't one. The idea of a finish line is born from the illusion that life is a journey from ignorance to enlightenment, from brokenness to wholeness, from lostness to foundness. But there was never such a line to cross. You were never incomplete. You were never missing anything. What you call growth, what you call progress, is simply the unfolding recognition of what has always been true. Yet the human being as it is, craves story. It needs to feel that it is going somewhere. That need gives us hope in dark hours, but it also creates a subtle prison. For as long as you believe there is somewhere you must arrive, you cannot rest here. You are always just a little bit away from home. So much of our suffering comes not from the past itself, but from our attempts to rewrite it. We imagine the alternate lives we could have lived, the choices we should have made, the people we might have been if only the cards had fallen differently. But these imagined lives are ghosts. They shimmer just beyond the reach of what's real. And every time you compare your actual life to those ghosts, you dishonor the sacredness of what actually is. You were never meant to be the best version of yourself. You were meant to be the only version of yourself. The perfection you seek is not in some ideal self-image, it's in the depth of the one that already lives and breathes within you. The truth is that the feeling of having wasted your life is an invitation, not a condemnation. It is a quiet knocking from the soul, asking to be seen, asking you to stop chasing, to stop proving, to stop trying so hard to be something. The exhaustion that follows years of striving is not evidence of failure. It is the body and spirit calling you home. And coming home to yourself can feel strange at first, almost unsettling, because the person you built in your mind, the one who was supposed to be accomplished, admired, certain, and strong, begins to crumble. What remains is someone far simpler, softer, more real, someone who does not need to pretend. There is a tenderness in that breaking, like the moment you realize the wave has always been the ocean. The separation was only imagined. And with that realization comes a strange, liberating humility. You begin to see that even your mistakes were not really yours. They were movements of the universe through the particular form you call me. Now, imagine standing on the shore of your own life. Behind you, the waves of memory crash and dissolve. Before you, the horizon stretches endlessly. You could spend your whole life staring backward, watching the ripples of what has been, or you could simply turn and face the open sea. Both choices are available, neither is wrong. But one keeps you bound to what has passed. The other invites you into the mystery that has always been waiting. This moment right now is not the sum of your past, nor the promise of your future. It is life in its purest form, unadorned, unmeasured, and utterly free. The trouble is that we rarely allow it to be enough. We clutter the present with demands for meaning, for validation, for proof that it matters. But meaning, my friend, is not something you give to life. It is what life gives to you when you stop asking it to explain itself. Look at the simple act of breathing. You inhale, and without effort, the universe enters you. You exhale, and you give yourself back to it. That rhythm has been happening your entire life, unnoticed, uncelebrated, perfectly balanced. You do not ask each breath what purpose it serves. You simply breathe. And yet, each breath sustains the miracle of your being. That is how life works. Meaning emerges not from what you do to it, but from what you allow it to show you. When you loosen your grip on the idea that your life must justify itself, something beautiful happens. The ordinary begins to shimmer. You notice the way sunlight falls on your table, the sound of distant laughter, the quiet pulse of your own heartbeat. And you realize, perhaps for the first time, that this unremarkable, unplanned, unspectacular moment is the essence of living. The modern world, however, does not reward this awareness. It worships noise. It values ambition over stillness, productivity over presence, attention over understanding. You are constantly being pulled away from yourself, told that you should be somewhere else, doing something else, becoming someone else. But the truth is that every time you abandon the present to chase a future, you deepen the illusion of waste. You create a gap where none exists. This is why so many people grow restless, even when they appear successful, because deep down, the soul cannot be satisfied with applause. It only longs for truth. And truth, unlike success, cannot be achieved. It can only be seen. When you begin to live with this seeing, your relationship to time begins to change. You stop asking, how much time do I have left? And start realizing that you are time. You are the eternal now, unfolding as this moment, this breath, this heartbeat. Life is not moving through you. You are life moving. The past then is not a weight to carry. It is a teacher. The mistakes you think ruined you were actually sculpting you. The losses you grieve were making space for something new to arise. You thought you were being broken. You were being rearranged. You see, the universe wastes nothing. Not a leaf that falls, not a tear that drops, not a single heartbeat. Everything is used, everything transformed. You are part of that alchemy. So how could you have wasted your life when life itself wastes nothing? Sometimes the path seems meaningless only because you're standing too close to it. Like a painting, its beauty can only be seen when you take a few steps back. You must allow the years to settle, to merge, to reveal their hidden symmetry. Only then do you begin to see the pattern. Only then does the chaos make sense. And as you begin to see that pattern, gratitude quietly replaces regret. You realize that the very moments you despised, the loneliness, the failure, the confusion, were the ones that softened your heart. They broke the shell of who you thought you should be so that something vast and tender could shine through. So, you see, you did not waste your life. You were preparing to live it. And this living has nothing to do with success or legacy. It is about seeing the sacred in the simple, the way water moves, the way your hands age, the way a small kindness lingers long after it's given. These things, though small, are the pulse of eternity. But you must learn to stay with the moment, to stay with yourself, to stay with life even when it offers no grand answers. Because when you stay, you begin to notice that the feeling of emptiness was never emptiness at all, it was spaciousness. It was room for you to finally arrive. Now, some will ask, but what about purpose? Don't we all need one? And yes, in a way, purpose gives us direction, but direction is not the same as destination. Purpose is not something you find, it is something you express through being. The tree does not need a purpose to grow, its growing is its purpose. The bird does not need a reason to sing, its singing is its being, and so it is with you. Perhaps your greatest purpose is not to achieve anything at all, but to embody awareness so fully that life can experience itself through you. That may not sound grand, but it is divine. If you can see that even one day of your life, one seemingly wasted, uneventful, ordinary day was actually filled with this quiet divine presence, then the idea of waste collapses. Because what you were calling wasted time was actually eternity playing dress up as delay. And if you can understand that, not just intellectually but inwardly, then a great peace will find you. Not the peace of resignation, but the peace of realization. The peace of knowing that you have never been outside of life's embrace. Everything that has ever happened, every failure, every detour, every regret was part of the unfolding of this awareness. It could not have been otherwise. When you truly see that, the ache of I have wasted my life begins to dissolve into a quiet smile, because you realize that the story you were mourning was never real to begin with. It was only a dream of who you thought you should have been. And awakening, after all, is nothing more than realizing that the dreamer was never separate from the dream. There comes a moment, often quietly, when you begin to understand that your life does not need to be different in order to be whole. It is a subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first. You stop asking, what should I be doing? And instead begin to listen. You start to feel that life, all along, has been whispering to you through everything you once ignored, through failure, through silence, through longing. It was never absent. You were simply too busy trying to edit the story to hear its voice. When this understanding dawns, it's not a flash of enlightenment, but more like the gradual clearing of fog. The trees of your existence, once obscured by regret and expectation, slowly come into view. You begin to see how perfectly imperfect it all was, how each stumble carved a kind of wisdom into your bones, how each disappointment softened your heart, and how even your confusion was guiding you toward clarity. This is the paradox of awakening. You find what you were seeking not by acquiring, but by relinquishing. The meaning you searched for begins to reveal itself when you stop demanding that life prove its worth. You realize that the search itself was never the problem. It was your assumption that meaning was missing that caused the ache. The feeling of having wasted your life was not the truth. It was the veil that covered it. And as that veil begins to fall, a new kind of stillness appears, not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of presence. The kind that exists between two heartbeats, in the quiet before you speak, in the way your chest rises without your asking. You notice that life doesn't need your permission to continue. It breathes you, it moves you, it carries you forward, regardless of your stories about it. You see, what most people call awakening is not the gaining of something new, but the gentle loss of what was never real. It's like waking from a long dream in which you spent years trying to find the meaning of the dream itself, only to realize that you were always safe in your bed. The dream was beautiful, tragic, complex, and rich, but it was never separate from the one who dreamt it. So too with life. You were never separate from the totality of it. Even in your loneliest, darkest hours, you were still held by the same intelligence that turns the planets and opens the flowers. You were never outside of that harmony, only asleep to it. To awaken, then, is not to rise above life, but to sink deeper into it, to see the extraordinary hiding within the ordinary, to realize that enlightenment was never a mountaintop, but the ground beneath your feet. You might look back now on all the years you thought were lost, and see that they were not lost at all. They were preparing you to see. They were the soil in which understanding could finally take root. Every regret was compost for wisdom. Every mistake was a seed of awareness waiting for the right season to bloom. And when that season arrives, you begin to move differently. Not because you found some grand new purpose, but because you are no longer fighting the rhythm of existence. Your actions become effortless, not because you've stopped caring, but because you finally trust the unfolding. You realize that your life was never something to manage, it was something to experience. The illusion of waste begins to dissolve because you no longer measure time in achievements, but in presence. You begin to see that 10 minutes of genuine awareness is worth more than 10 years of unconscious striving. When this recognition takes hold, even your past pain begins to glow with a strange light. You see that what once felt unbearable was, in fact, the breaking of the shell around your being. It was how life made space for itself within you, and you begin to thank the very moments that once made you curse your existence. You bow to the storm because you see now that it wasn't against you, it was refining you. And then something even deeper happens. You begin to laugh. Not out of mockery or defiance, but from the sheer relief of seeing how unnecessary all the struggle was. You realize that life had never required your control. It only needed your attention. You had been running through open fields with a blindfold on, searching for the way out, unaware that there were no walls. You may recall the times you prayed for clarity, for purpose, for a sign, and perhaps you now see that those prayers were answered not in words, but in silence. Not through instruction, but through revelation, because clarity does not come from adding more answers. It comes from letting go of all the questions that were never yours to carry. There's an old saying that the truth sets you free, but first it makes you uncomfortable. And that discomfort, that deep unease of not knowing what to do with your life, was the beginning of your freedom. It stripped you of false certainty, of borrowed dreams, of identities that were never truly yours. It left you naked before life itself. And that nakedness, that vulnerability, is the doorway to peace. Because when you stand without pretense, without the armor of who you think you should be, life finally meets you as you are. And that meeting is love. You begin to see that love was never something to find or to deserve. It was the quiet awareness that remained after everything else fell away. It is the gentle hum behind all experience, the soft current that carries every joy and every sorrow. When you touch that current, even briefly, you realize that nothing has ever truly been lost. For how can anything be lost in a universe that recycles itself infinitely? How can a life be wasted when each breath, each tear, each moment of longing becomes part of the great turning? You are not a fragment of the cosmos. You are the cosmos, looking at itself through the eyes of this particular human form.